ordeal between the Chi-Coms and the Anglo-Americans. But when I see the Anglo-American group, they want the eugenics. They want the world government. They've got the big plans. And of the three groups, I see them in the final equation as the most wicked. But I see the Russians also kind of following originally the eugenics model. So from my research, people have to understand, why not just surrender to the New World Order, let them have world government so this won't happen. They want the world government to reduce population. They want it to carry out the next phase. So if they ever got it, then we're even in more trouble. I mean, these are just control freaks to the power of infinity. I know that's a long, rambling analysis, but your take on the mindset of these three elites, how they interchange.
Well, ultimately, and I don't talk about this much in my books, but there's only one thing to explain what I call the generational effect in the Anglo-American establishment. If it were like Stalin, if it were like Hitler, who were individual power men, power hungry, it would die out after they die out. But it doesn't in the Anglo-American establishment. It goes from one leader after another, and actually it's an oligarchy of several leaders who keep themselves hidden behind the scenes. But this has a generational effect that has been going on for centuries, and that's not typical of a single leader that keeps moving on. And I have to owe that to what I think is a satanic dark side connection, ultimately, that gives guidance to these conspiracies. But I do think that in order to...
Hold on, let me stop you. That's very powerful. Look at Bohemian Grove. Look at Skull and Bones. All my research, whether it's real or not, whether you're a Christian or not, the elite do believe they're getting that dark guidance. Please continue.
That's right. And I think that China and Russia are tend to have a generational transitional effect as well. It keeps going on beyond one powerful leader after another. I think, frankly, that they all intend to win. They don't ever intend to share power with anyone. If you look at the Chinese mentality is one of disgust for the West. They do not respect the West, except for its temporary power. They've always viewed the West as an inferior society. There is a disregard for humanity that's endemic within Chinese culture. They don't mind killing millions. The Slavs don't mind it either. That's why there's been such a disregard for humanity among Stalin and others. And there is among the elite, the globalist elite, this same almost satanic-based corruption that has a disregard for humanity, even though Western culture does not have it. It respects humanity because of its Anglo and Christian roots. But I think that we're dealing with three predator powers that will never work together except in temporary alliances. I do believe that China will begin this war with Russia. They, in fact, and Russia is only learning about the Anglo-American conspiracy. One of the signs of that is RT, Russia Today, which is a KGB television outfit, is focusing most of its broadcast to American conservatives, trying to help and foment conspiracy, not because, they see it as a way to help take down America. They're not our friend, even though they put out a lot of truth sometimes because they're trying to play our friend.
Exactly. They see the globalist trying to weaken America and Europe so they can take it over, so the globalists can manage us better, and they'll aid that because they understand it weakens the people generally.
That's right. That's right.
And boy, that's why the elite are so arrogant coming out in the open, as you said earlier. Not that I'm on some high horse, but I look at the slovenliness, the slob behavior. I know executives, wealthy people who hold high position, and they could care less about reality. They're decadent slobs. They're not dedicated to anything but hedonism. They're ignorant. And then you look at the general public, they're like that. I mean, there's a large portion that's awake, but it's still a minority. And so you've got either people that are waking up and becoming more decent and hardworking, or you've got an acceleration, a wheat from the chaff. And I think about what'll happen with these decadent populations during real crises when our forebears were a lot more moral during the Great Depression. University estimates are 7 million during the 10-year Great Depression died of starvation or complications from malnutrition. or other connections to the Depression. 90% rural, most of them self-sufficient versus 89% urban. Half of the 11% being self-sufficient that are rural. I mean, that people bomb of just bedlam, it'll make New Orleans look like a cakewalk. It boggles my mind the type of powder keg we're sitting on.
Indeed, I'm really worried about the population demographics as well. For example, we have a problem with the Black communities with such a high percentage without a father in the home, with a high percentage on welfare. We have a fairly large percentage of the Latino community, which is angry with American society and trying to take it back. We have a large corrupt sector. We have, 40 million people plus on food stamps in America. This is a tremendous benefit corrupt, huge minority that threatens our very well-being someday. And that's why I really concentrate on these population density maps, which I put in strategic relocation. You've got to be very, very careful of where those population densities are going to empty out someday when food supplies get cut off or when there's a major war or even the threat. The biggest thing I worry about terrorism is not real terrorism, because I think most of what we face is provoked terrorism or manufactured terrorism by a government, but it's the government reaction to the very terrorist threats that they create that creates a great deal of consternation, whether it's closing down freeways, shutting down the airlines. It could shut down transportation at will, all in the name of terrorism, and it causes instant panic among people. And that's one of the things that I talk about in strategic relocation, about how to find safe places, is to be very, very careful of analyzing where those exit routes are going to be. A lot of people, when I'm designing homes for people, they ask, well, how many miles should I be away from a road or a freeway? And while I generally give 5 miles and a mile against any major local road, it's much more important to understand how to be out of the way, not to build on a hill, not to be visible from a long distance away. How to be away on turning roads rather than long straight roads where you can see 100 miles. It's important to pick the strategic terrain that people will not be tempted to go to as they're being refugees going down a road.
Let me go back to that for a moment. I mean, you talk about Hawaii, Florida being the worst area because one's a peninsula, huge population, the other is an isolated island that's not self-sufficient. But just looking at Los Angeles, I mean, you're talking about in California, 30-something million people. You're talking about 6, 7, 10 million, that whole metro area. I mean, you talk about bedlam. If there's an earthquake, which they predict is going to hit, that'll make what happened last year in Japan look tame, that is going to be a Mad Max scenario. And if the feds, who are so corrupt now in the States, couldn't deal with Katrina, I mean, for me, anyone living in Southern California is off their rocker nuts.
Well, the problem is that, you have that big basin, and you've driven it, I've driven it. It takes you, to almost 2 hours at freeway speeds to cross that basin. And there are 7 exits out of that basement. 7 exits for over 30 million people. That's just insane, to be there. And I'm very clear about in my book that people should not be in those, or if they have to be, and I'm realistic, some people, good Christian conservatives, have to be there. They've got to be close to some of the minor exits so they can be the first ones out of that basin if they have any possibility of retreating.
Exactly. That's the good news, because most people, being zombies, it's sad they're zombies, and they're going to wait until the system tells them what to do. They're going to sit there for 2 or 3, 4 days looking for magic help that's going to come from Big Daddy government. And when they figure out the help isn't coming, that's when the panic begins. And I've made this point, as the Depression gets worse and people finally start to prep, that's going to drive up prices in all of this.
It is. You look at San Diego, for example, there's even a worse situation. Not only is it a major nuclear target, but you can't go north without running into the LA basin. There's just no way to get around it. You have to go east to El Centro and start north, and then you've got the Grand Canyon blocking your way. I mean, it's an incredible design feature to try to get a safe route of people out of the San Diego area because of the fact that they're blocked. And once you get off around the Grand Canyon, you've got two choices. You go left and you go up towards Las Vegas, and that's a terrible place to try to get through because it's only a freeway. That's the only road going through there, or Highway 95. And then if you go the other way, there's a little narrow 2-lane road, Highway 89, going up the east side of the Grand Canyon. I mean, people trying to get out of Southern California have a real problem.
So in my mind, am I correct saying that's probably one of the worst places in North America itself, in the contiguous area? Or is it D.C.? Is it New York? I mean, New York, we're talking about L.A. being bad. Wow, what's New York being a peninsula?
Yeah, New York is number one. That's the worst area, New York, New Jersey area. And just because, you know, at least in the LA Basin, once you get over the mountains, you've got some clear shots, you've got some desert. You don't have that in the New York, New Jersey area. You've just got subdivisions which get a little bit less dense as you go 50, as you go 100 miles, you've still got millions of people. So it's just going to be one clogged mass of humanity in the New York area. And by the way, you're cut off on the East Coast by the water. So you've only got half of an exit, and it's all the more blocked. Number two, of course, is the LA, San Diego, Southern California. Number three is probably the Seattle area, a tremendous confluence of packed people into a bowl created and surrounded by mountains with, once again, probably 3 or 4 exits out of that Seattle area. And it's a major nuclear target to boot, which makes it even more panic-stricken when war comes.
You know, the problem is, it's not just Joel Skousen saying this. It's not just Alex Jones saying this. When you study what governments are saying, and I've seen all these Pentagon reports, British Ministry of Defense reports, they say it is a probability. I just saw a new MIT report out saying within 20 years, they see total civilization collapse. And there's all these real factors that could cause and trigger partial or full collapse. But then you've got the Agenda 21 crowd doing everything they can to sabotage stuff so they can consolidate power. It is pure deviltry. I mean, they think there's a method to their madness, Joel, but there really isn't. It's pure craziness.
Yeah, you know, a lot of people say it won't happen because human beings just won't destroy the infrastructure that they've built up. And I said, well, if these were people just doing it for their own self-interest, you'd be right. They wouldn't do it. But remember, these people already have as much power, as much wine, women, song, yachts, cabins in the mountains, anything a human being wants, and they still want more power. What explains that? It can only be satanic inspiration, because they've got already as much. Why would you want any more power? What more power can a human being manipulate or work with, unless they're working for a higher power which wants to destroy God, which wants to destroy what is good in this world? And I think that's the kind of battle. And unfortunately, the more soft this world gets, the less the world believes in systematic evil. They only believe in a few random individuals. They trust Americans. They trust, and they believe in positive thinking. That's deadly in today's world.
You're right. Oh, yeah. People say, be positive.